Hwang.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sharkey, and I'm going to call you my speaker as well. And Mr. Mednick, thank you very much. It's very insightful, and the concept, the legal concept of home rule is very well explained by you. One of the important parts is, in my experience, we talked earlier, Speaker, your leadership as Speaker and the initiation of the Moore Commission, the what they call it, municipal opportunities and regional efficiencies, to look at regionalization and the shared cost concept. I was very intrigued by that. In fact, just past legislative session, the governor included part of that package in regards to shared costs among our municipalities. I applaud that. I think efficiencies and things of that sort are important to reduce burden on our municipalities, particularly local property tax impact on our residents in each municipality. And I see all the rationale. And even as we looked at this, it's really important to apply your interpretation to Connecticut. It is important for people to understand that, as you cited in 1957, that we established the legislative intent of home rule that's been referred to. And it is also very important to understand in its aftermath, the Connecticut General Assembly and the democratically controlled legislature voted to remove county government in the state of Connecticut in 1960. That was a precursor to kind of understanding that Connecticut is not the Midwest via the Dillon Rule, that we as a state in a legislative vote made the decision to move away from county government / government structure and regionalization to local home rule. That's why that history line is really important. And I think as you prepared that presentation to the broader audience, you need to explain that in light of 57, in 59, the state of Connecticut made the decision to move away from existing county government. That being said, I think it's equally important to understand that the history of this state has an impact in regards to the concept of home rule. We have very strong representative town meetings. In fact, one of the towns I represent in Easton actually has a town meeting to determine budget votes and issues in person. I know it comes very difficult when we look at larger municipalities, but this state was founded on the concept of regional town governance, local control, and home rule. Now, I understand that we have increased complexities, increased challenge, and particularly in this day and age of COVID, with federal money flowing in, the allocation of it, and again, trying to streamline efficiencies, that we have to find a balancing act. But the strict interpretation of a legal manner when you're applying in the context of many states in this country of county government, where home rule as a concept is defaulted to a county-wide regionalization, is a challenge that we need to note when applied to the state of Connecticut. So I'm eager to hear more about that. And as I said earlier in my opening remark, that I hope that more local municipalities, from big cities to suburbs, as well as our rural communities, and have their local leaders be able to opine and offer their perspective and their interpretation of home rule. Not simply a legal interpretation based upon a broader. Connecticut is unique. There are things that we can learn in efficiencies, but when you look at the concept of home rule, it is not just steeped in legal interpretation. It is steeped in the history of how our towns have been formed, governed, and engaged in having impact. There is a collaboration with our state and local governance. And if there's anything of a proof of that to me as I study the history of it, is we remove county government. And per your recommendation and statement, that we actually implement a statutory interpretation of home rule. It may be different to the Dillon Rule in other states, but Connecticut's unique. And I hope, as I mentioned to Speaker Sharkey, my first exchange with him literally almost 8-9 years ago, it is an important conversation that existed back then. It will be a continual dialogue moving forward. but we have to make policy in the context of the unique aspect of Connecticut and its local municipalities. Is 169 towns totally efficient? Perhaps not. Perhaps yes. But ultimately, it offers a point of conversation. And we do have that statutory interpretation of home rule, not applied from other states, but applied to Connecticut. So I'm eager and I'm honored to be a member on the Planning and Development Committee. I'm equally honored to be engaged in this conversation where we can find a balancing act. But let's not forget our history. Let's not forget how our towns and our local governance have a say in representing the people. At the same time, I think as we learn in this COVID environment, we all have to work together. But the basis of control, the basis of ultimate decision making, I'm a believer that local knows their community best. And the state one size fits all does not always provide the best equitable and best sustainable solution moving forward. So I thank you for that opportunity, but I wanted to offer that context that I hope as your organization engage in further communications and further conduct, that you broaden the base, but also account for the historical context of local governance in relative to home rule and the history of how it occurred in Connecticut. Connecticut is not Iowa. It is not Mississippi. It is not even New York. But at the same time, we can learn from the best of the best, but we can also learn to retain what is best for Connecticut and the local municipalities' ability to manage their own destiny. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. That's him over there. I'll stick with chair here. And I believe Attorney Mednick may have some comments, and I'll start with Mr. Sharkey and then go to Attorney Mednick.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that, Senator. And I think I appreciate you mentioning the Moore Commission, for example. One of the things that the Moore Commission, in looking for regional efficiencies, the first thing that the Moore Commission had to do was identify all the statutory restrictions that had over the years been imposed on municipalities that prevented them from seeking the regional efficiencies that we might otherwise like. Why is that? Because here in Connecticut, under our Constitution and our statutory structure, under a Dillon's Rule state, towns can only do what the state authorizes them to do. So therefore, if the state of Connecticut has not expressly granted a town the ability to share police departments with a neighboring police department, there needs to be a statutory authorization to do just that. It's not that a town can unilaterally decide that they can take that action. You mentioned Easton as a great example of how their local government creates budgets and how that is a choice that to their credit, that the residents of Easton employ, but it's only because state statute allows them to do that. It's not again, I'll use the example that I was raising before. If a city like New Haven decides it wants to issue ID cards for all residents that have other legal implications, can they do that? Well, I don't know. I don't know, because I don't know if the state has expressly authorized any municipality to do something like that. So it's not necessarily just a legal construct that in the abstract. This is the law of the state of Connecticut. And if the state wished to move to a true home rule context like Attorney Mednick mentioned in Michigan and in other Midwestern states, then we would need to amend our Constitution and the statutory framework beyond that. So that's the only pushback I might offer. This is it is the way we do things in Connecticut, and we grant a lot of authority to towns, but it's not unlimited and it's not sovereign. So, and I don't know if Attorney Mednick had any thoughts as well.
Again, you stole my thunder, Mr. Speaker. But the point I want to make to the distinguished ranking member is that the adoption of Article 10 came after the elimination of counties. The counties were removed in the late 1950s. The Constitution was amended in the mid 1960s. And so the concept of local sovereignty, which was not addressed by Article 10, cannot be implied because we would like to see it implied. Just about my entire legal practice, particularly in the last 10 years, has really moved closer and closer to just representing local governments. There's nobody, I'm sure there's many of you and there's many local officials, so I'll stand with all of you who care deeply about the operation of local government. I love working with local governments. I love working with the Council on Small Towns, with CCM, all the entities that work on establishing rights for local governments and have tried over the years to do that. But it's within the context that the Speaker clearly enunciated, and that is the context of Dillon's rule. And again, to change that, you have to change the state constitution. But to go back to a point that I made earlier, be careful what you wish for, because even in those states where they have what they call constitutional home rule, there are traps that local governments can fall into when you think you've got authority, but then the General Assembly, the legislature has prohibited that authority, or it's hidden in a bill. You just don't know that it's out there. You're so much better off in some ways knowing what the express grants of authority are than having to walk through a minefield in the states that don't have legislative home rule. Last point I want to make, and again, the Speaker talked about this, one of the things I do in just about every charter I've advised throughout the state of Connecticut is to develop interlocal cooperation, whether you call it regionalism or interlocalism. I try in those charters to make sure that even if the government says you need to have a department, if you enter into an interlocal compact, which would be, again, governed by state law, by a state enabling legislation, you would have the ability to do so long as the service that is mandated by your charter is being met by the region, being met by the compact that you have with another local government. So I try to write charters to make sure they don't constrict the operation of a local government, but they give the local government the ability to expand as much as they can. So I do believe an expansive view of local authority, but it's constrained by our state constitution and by the laws enacted by the General Assembly.
Thank you, Attorney Mednick. Anything further, Senator Hwang, that you want to add to that? And with us, we have another member of our ACIR.